Hello and welcome or welcome back to the Brave Talks podcast, where we teach you the business of being creative. I'm your host, Samantha Taylor, and today we have Alex Howe joining. He is the ex-social media community lead at Notion. And Notion, if you didn't already know, is one of the tools that I use in my freelance business every single day. And it's been an incredibly fast-growing product and community at that. And this is one that Alex helped build from the ground up. But like all good things, it came to an end, and that is what we're chatting about today. How did Alex go from full-time to freelance by leveraging his community, relationships, and his social media presence to help him break into that freelance world? We're going to give you all the tips in this episode. I hope you enjoy. I'm so excited to be chatting with you. To be frank, you have been one of my favorite kind of people on the internet to follow along who works in social media and who works as a creative, but specifically in the tech startup world, because that's what I do. And I think I don't know, you've just always been a character that I followed along and have always kind of like kept tabs on, which is so funny because this is our first time actually chatting like face to face or virtually. But yeah, I just wanted to say, I think the work that you did at Notion for so long, I just want to applaud you for, because I really believe that you brought so much life and character to that brand. And you guys were doing it at such a fast pace. The things that were being built and shipped, and I think the growth was like one of the fastest I've seen out of a tech startup in a really long time. So I just want to applaud you and say that you have been someone that I've followed for a long time in that space.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you're going to video or not, but if you can't see it, if you're listening to this, I'm making little finger hearts. I'm grinning ear to ear. My head is physically getting bigger. No, but thank you. I really appreciate it. And, same likewise goes for you, right? I think we first met just like as oomfies, as the kids say now, on Twitter, online. And we'll get into it, I think, in our chat. I'm just so big on admiring people's work. And so the same goes for you and what you were doing at Contra, right?
Contra.
And now as, kind of doing your own thing as your own freelancer. And then I also want to say, like, to your point about, the success we had at Notion, like, that's also like, I cannot take credit for that, right? Like it's the effort of so many people behind the scenes. I think that all culminated in what a lot of people saw as success on social. But yeah, it truly it takes a village, and so I'm really grateful to know people like you and to have worked with people like I did at Notion and other places.
I love that you said that, because it really, like, social is kind of like the ending point, right? Like there's a whole team that builds all the features and designs all of the different, graphics and things that we get to share and we get to take and make it creative and make it speak to a certain audience. So yeah, I think, our job's really fun for that, because we get to work with almost every touch point of a company. I would love to hear more about a little bit about your time at Notion and maybe what just made you want to go full-time freelance and what made you want to go freelance.
Totally. So I was at Notion for 4 years, right? So I think the overall timeline, I started in March of 2020, literally like 4 days before we went remote for COVID-19. At the time, there were 40 people at the company. And by the time I left in 2024, there were like 700 or 800 employees across 6 offices. Like, our audience had grown by so much. A lot of, like, pretty much everything I learned about marketing and about social media was from Notion. I didn't, like a lot of people who work in social or in marketing, like, my background wasn't that, like, I didn't study that formally. And so it was all hands-on learning and a lot of great mentorship from people at Notion. So by the time I left, I was like, well, I've learned so much. I've gotten to, the privilege to do so many amazing things, but I have done it all for one brand, right? And I think a lot of people, especially marketers, I think can identify with the feeling of like, I've been doing this for a long time, and sometimes you just want something different. And so when I was leaving, I was like, I could go straight to another full-time job, or I could take some time to like take a lot of what I've learned and try to apply it to, different companies, different industries, different products, and also just like learn from different types of people who work at those different types of places, right? So I think I was really looking, like, when making the decision to go freelance, it really wasn't, I think, for money or a lot of people freelance for flexibility. Like, I don't think I had a lot of those constraints. I was really just, I think I can learn more and apply more with like a bigger diversity of clients rather than like going straight to full time.
When you were making that decision, which is a hard one to make, to kind of step away from a role that you really love and a community of people that you really have loved over the past 4 years, what were some of the factors that came after? For me, kind of during that stage, I was writing down people in my network and their emails, and I had sent out, different emails to different people saying, hey, I'm going to go freelance in the next few weeks. I just want to let you know in case anything comes up. Did you do anything like that?
Yeah. So I think practically one of the first things, or like before I left, I was downloading everything that I had worked on just for posterity. Don't forget to do that because as we saw earlier this month, sometimes the social platform's not going to be there. Your work will maybe not live forever on the internet. So be smart about that. And yeah, I think it's like I don't think I like as formally I think like made a list or anything like that, but I was letting people know and people knew about it. My closer friends knew about it beforehand. There were already like before I had even announced that I was leaving, I had already started putting out feelers,
Yeah.
right? Like I didn't want to like have a hard break where suddenly I was completely starting from scratch. Like I already knew some companies who had an interest in working with me or who like, places I had friends where I knew I could tap them in.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like explicit, but I had a bit of a security blanket, just like or like a feeling that I was
Yeah.
going to stay. And then obviously like when it was happening, I'm very active on my own social media across many different platforms. And I think I was very strategic about like leveraging what I knew to be like a good 4 years at Notion, filled with a lot of good work and, considerable presence. Like Notion, by the time I left, the brand was pretty well known. So it was a good like, touchstone moment to be like, hey, like I'm not here anymore. And honestly, I was pretty surprised at how much inbound I got just from like my like going away post for
Yeah.
Notion was
Yeah,
which was
that's what I saw.
a
Yeah.
huge privilege. But I do think that a lot of people like can have a very similar experience, right? Like anytime you're looking to leave somewhere, if you've done good work, which hopefully you have, and you're going into freelancing, like that's a good moment to let people know. It's a very organic moment to let people know.
I remember seeing your post. And yeah, like over the course of a few days, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of responses. There's a lot of likes. And yeah, just like a lot of people celebrating you too, which feels really good when you're walking away from something. So when you were leaving and you mentioned like you kind of started putting out feelers, did you do that a few weeks before, maybe a month, or kind of what did that look like? How that work?
Yeah, I love it. Let's get into like the meat of
Yeah.
it, right? Well, so I think kind of a point to anchor around. I don't remember, who told me this or where I read it. Is like you never want to take on a new job like running away from something,
Mm.
right? You want to be running toward a new opportunity. So I would say for anyone who is in that consideration stage of like, I work full time now, but I have like a want for freelancing. I
Mhm.
do think it's important to keep in mind, again, it's like, are you running away from the full time job for XYZ reason? Or is truly like the opportunity of freelancing
Yeah.
what you're excited about? And I think a lot of what I did while I was still working at Notion full time was balancing that out, like
Mhm.
making sure that I had something to run towards in terms of both like places to go or people to reach out to.
Yeah.
Um, because I think the fear there is like you're like, oh, a lot of people aren't satisfied with their current job, which is super fair, and you might just like jump at something and you'll take the first lifeboat, and it might not be better. And I do think that's a big fear and a very valid fear of a lot of people going freelance is like, okay, what if it's not better? So yeah, the other thing that I'll say is like I'm pretty like I'm of the big opinion that in order to reinforce that, like you should always be interviewing or like applying to jobs or just like
Mhm.
checking out new things because again if you're working full-time somewhere and you see an opportunity that you're kind of interested in and you chat with them, I think it becomes pretty clear whether or not you're running towards it or running away from something,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Like I've had calls where like I was maybe even just like a year or two into Notion where immediately I was like, I'm talking with this recruiter and I'm talking about how good my job is right now. Like I'm not actually that interested in this role. But
Mhm.
then there are times, and I think I felt this a lot towards the end of my time at Notion, where I was like, wow, there's like a lot of really exciting stuff out there that I can't do because it's just not congruent with like having a full-time job. Like I wanted to take on some of these part-time projects that people were reaching out to me for.
Mm.
So I would say like in terms of timeline, like my timeline is not your timeline, is not, it's
Yeah.
not a rule, but I would say like as early as possible.
Mhm.
And the worst that can happen is, they turn you down or you decide that you're not ready for that.
Exactly. I love the idea of jumping into some interviews and things, even if your mind isn't completely made up, because honestly, it's like practice. Because even when you're a freelancer, even though you're not formally interviewing for a position to freelance, like you are having client calls, you are pitching yourself, you're answering their questions. Like it is in some sense, it's an interview of sorts. And I love the points about just being excited, right? I think that it's a fair assumption to say, like when people jump into freelancing when they just feel purely exhausted, which is very valid, but they're not actually excited about becoming their own boss, it becomes exponentially harder to do that, because not only are you doing your creative work, but you're also managing your business, building
Yeah.
your business, like doing all the admin. Going back to you kind of using social, I've worked in the freelance like industry technically for like 5 years now, building a freelance
Right.
product, talked to so many freelancers. I've been a freelancer. And I think that one common through line is that so many people want to build their own businesses and they want to get clients and meet other freelancers, but they have resistance to being on social media, whether it's for themselves on like a personal account or maybe making like a branded account. I guess for you, if you have any opinion about this, do you think that people should kind of do that?
Yeah. Um, kind of how like I would approach this question if a company asked me. A lot of companies ask me like, when do we need to start focusing on our social media presence, right? There is no one size fit all answer. So the answer is not like yes, you should or no, you shouldn't. It is up to you. But I do think that there's no downside to being active on social media. It can only get you more attention, especially if you're already doing the work. It's that last step of just packaging it and sharing it.
Yeah.
But I also understand that's not a muscle that a lot of people want to exercise or want to do. I think it comes very naturally for me because I love attention. So it's always been very, I before I worked in social media, I've always been active on social media. So
Yeah.
I understand that that's not how it operates. But I do want to say, like, for anyone else, like in the marketing world, like you yourself as a freelancer, you almost have to think about you yourself as like you're marketing yourself, right? So just like you would market anything, there's a funnel, right? And I'm going to bring up these lovely growth marketing terms or whatever. This is not my area of expertise, right? But like, there's layers to this. Like first you have to make people aware of what you're doing. And then like it can't just be one touch point, right?
Yeah.
Like people have to be aware of what you're doing. Then people have to be, you have to have a face-to-face conversation. You can compare that to like a sales call or something. Like there's many steps before you get to that final, like, oh, now I'm going to sign this contract as a freelancer.
Mhm.
So I think it benefits you to have as many of those touch points as possible. And social media is one of them, right? So
Yes.
if you're not doing social media, which I think is fine, you do have to think about like, well, what other things am I doing around like sharing my work and making it aware? Like, you could go a route where you put your name on all of the like networks like Contra or like
Yeah.
other places. You're in newsletters, like basically like what is your distribution, because like it sounds bad but it's like you are selling yourself, right? Like you're selling
Yeah.
your services as a product, and so you do have to think about how you're going to get, if you want work and if you want inbound, especially how are
Mhm.
people going to find you? And if not social media, then it should be somewhere else. I do
Yes.
think the benefit of social media is, again, it can be a little bit more reciprocal where, if you have a good network of friends, past coworkers, of other freelancers, you
Mhm.
can all like amplify each other. I think that's a really nice thing that happens on social media. I wish it happened more on social media, right? Like,
No.
but yeah,
Yeah.
so I would say like think about it and like try it. Don't force yourself to do anything that feels really like heavy or
Yeah.
like if you're excited about your work, you should be excited to share your work. So that's kind of what I tell people is like
Yeah.
lean into what you're excited about sharing, and that should hopefully make social media a little bit easier for you.
Mhm. And I think it's a good like testing point, right? Like if you aren't excited to engage in your community online, which maybe would be people who work in your industry and who are talking about similar things as you're working on, then maybe it's like, okay, am I am I working on the right thing right now? Like, am I actually interested in this or passionate about it in some way? Not that we have to be like, okay, my work is my only passion, but there
So,
should be, that level of interest. So I think it's a fair point to say that, like, yeah, if you're not excited to share the work that you're doing or even chat with people, or even just like reading what people are saying online in your industry, it's maybe a question to yourself if you should pivot. But I think maybe for anyone who is feeling hesitant about being on social, whether it's a personal or a branded account, I think the easiest thing to do is literally just to share your work at a baseline. Just share your work. You don't have to become this thought leader. While I think there's a lot of benefits to that, which I want to jump into, I think at the baseline, just sharing to your community the work that you're doing. Because I have had so many random people, like people I've never interacted with before, just reach out to me because they saw something on LinkedIn. And I'm like, how did you see that? And they're like, oh, I just searched, website designer. And I'm like, and I just came up. Like, you just never know what the algorithm's serving people.
yeah. And again, it's like, we're proof of that, right? It's like, this
Yeah,
is a connection that was formed through like,
100%.
a little mutual admiration society over on social media.
Yeah.
And I will say I loved your point about like, what content too are you consuming? Because, I think I think most people use social media, right? So even if you are hesitant about posting, especially posting about yourself, you still might be like reading a lot of other things. So it's like, what are you gravitating towards that you like? And like, think about that. And it's like, well, if you like it so much, like, is that something you're working on too? Like, could you just share that? And I also think like, I think something that has benefited me a lot is I'm like very effusive about my like likes on social media. Like if I see something, see something, say something. If you see something good, like if I see something that I really like, I'll like it, I'll comment, I'll follow. Like I love celebrating other people's success and like the things that they do. And I think that helps because again, it is like a community, and a lot of that energy I think is put into this like system that then feeds other people to be a little bit more
Yeah.
excited about other people's work too.
100%. Yeah, sometimes when I'm working with clients on kind of like social media strategies and whatnot for their businesses, I found myself a few times now literally saying, we've forgotten that social media is social. So many people really just don't use it as a social tool, even in our personal lives, making friends, or I don't know. I do that all the time. And I think like that's the point. I think carrying that into your business, it serves the same purpose. Again, like you said, you and I, like we've never worked together, probably have some mutuals, but we just connected on social and we're here now. So I think I think maybe it's scary for people to kind of approach it that way, but when you start doing it and you start reaping the rewards, it feels good.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people have a please don't perceive me presence on social. Like, and I understand it. It's definitely daunting. And I think we have moved as an ecosystem towards essentially like voyeurism of
Yeah.
like unrealistic lifestyles of like other people's successes. Like it is daunting. Yeah, I have a little print on my desk that's actually from the Oakland Museum of Art from an exhibit a couple years ago. And it was just a bunch of like there's a bunch of mantras, and one of them says like be more than a consumer. And actually the exhibit itself was more about like resource usage and like the environment and the ecosystem as a whole. But I really latched onto that one because I think it applies so much to how I think about work. Like
Mm.
I consume content voraciously, and it's not saying like you shouldn't consume content. That's not even possible, I think, in our modern society. But it is like be more than just a consumer. And I think what you just said about like people might find that they enjoy sharing things. I
Mhm.
do think there's like a positive reinforcement loop there of like the more like it's not like the more you consume, the less you create. You can do both and you can turn both up at the same time. You can consume a
Mhm.
ton of content and ramp up how much you produce. And
Yeah.
the more you make and the more you share, I think there's a healthy relationship there that can
100.
develop. Um,
Yeah.
between like you making things, you sharing things, other people appreciating it, motivating you to like make more. There's a dark side of that too, right? Is like making things just for validation. But again, if you're already freelancing and hopefully working on something and making something that you're proud of, that part of it is already done. So
Mhm.
the last step is just pressing send, and it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be nice.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be there is no perfect. It's just putting yourself out there in a way that feels good to you. There's no kind of like standard format. And something that I've been doing recently is like writing little blogs for my creative studio site. And it's more so explaining why I took on those projects with certain clients and like why did that matter to me, right? Like there's different ways to even share the work that you're doing. It could be about, yeah, why you took it on. It could be about the project itself. And I think one thing we mentioned earlier was just like maybe thought leadership. I feel like when I think of you, I definitely think of you, and I think thought leadership looks different to everyone, first of all. Maybe Alex, from your perspective and kind of in your own terms, what is thought leadership to you? And kind of,
Yeah, good question. I love that phrase and I hate that phrase. I love that phrase because anytime someone says it, I think THOT, the spelling THOT leadership, which is what, I aspire to. Um, I dislike that term because I think it has become a phrase that means very little.
It's
Uh,
diluted a bit. Yeah.
it's diluted a bit, and I think now the association that my brain immediately goes to if someone tells me they're a thought leader is I'm like, okay, you have AI LinkedIn posts that are extremely long, 4 line breaks, hashtags. Um,
Painful.
you might be more of a talker than a doer. I think there are a lot of great thought leaders out there who don't fall into this category, but I do think there's so much noise on social media nowadays, especially platforms where long form content is awarded. That,
Yeah.
in my opinion, like I it's not a phrase that I personally like actually aspire to, right? Like I don't think that's not like the title or the kind of like short form like
We need a
identifier
new
that I
phrase.
want.
Yeah, we need a new phrase.
I do need a new phrase.
I feel the same. I mean, I don't post too much about kind of my work and whatnot, but I think like even if I did, I don't think I would ever be able to take that label because I look at people who've like studied or worked in an industry for maybe decades or who have really had intense experience or past experiences working or I don't know, living, just doing a plethora of things for me to be like, okay, I would consider them someone who has been through the ringer in their industry, who have seen every kind of side of things. Like maybe then I would be like, okay, that they maybe would be considered into that bucket.
Yeah, and I do think, a lot of times when I think about thought leadership, I think of someone who is like quite prescriptive or like very black and white opinionated and like this is
Mm,
how you do this, which again to me is not really that's not a sign necessarily of someone whose advice I would take. I
yeah.
learned this firsthand, like probably a month or two ago. I made a LinkedIn post about why I thought the Instagram grid aesthetic mattered. And
I was
honestly, I wrote it.
I
I
was gonna
feel personally very strong about this, but I wrote it in a way that kind of falls into like that thought, quote unquote, thought leadership type thing. And I
uh-huh.
very quickly realized, after posting it, that I was being too prescriptive. Like what
Mm,
I thought was what worked for the teams that I've, contracted for and led was not going to work for anyone. And so
mhm.
it was controversial. I could see why that's something you could lean into, right? Like it got a lot of attention, both good and bad. But I also, I edited the post and I was like, hey,
Mhm.
I realized my mistake. Like I'm not trying to be that person who's telling you what to do.
Yeah.
I just had a thought and put it out there.
Mhm.
That's not thought leadership.
Now talking to you about it, it is funny to see how people interact with posts like that because when I read it, I was like, oh, that's Alex's opinion based on his experience. I never would have like looked at that and been like, that's the way he thinks it is, and it's only that way. But there's people that approach it like that, and which is why your comments were full of people being like, no, da da da, X, Y, and Z reasons you're wrong. But it's funny because really that was, I think, authentically just your opinion, but it is there's such a thin line with sharing opinions, right? And then people taking it into maybe a more like black and white way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always said social media is not a place for nuance. And I love that you brought up that you didn't read it that way because you know me and you followed my work,
Yeah.
right? You knew that I wasn't just like talking out of my ass. You
Mhm,
knew that I had experience to back it up. And
mhm.
you also know that like I make things, right? So when I have opinions on how things look or aesthetically what works, like that is such a huge part, I think, of what my personal work is all
Yeah.
about. So it made sense, right? But a lot of people saw that just on a feed, so they don't know me. And I do think that's one of the key differentiators of like, true inspirational thought leadership And this kind of shallower thing is it takes time to understand like and see people doing things, like people showing you that they've done things, and that's what makes you trust them and their advice versus people who talk about doing something. You don't know if they've done it. And I think there's a danger of that because I certainly see a lot of people and even some people I've worked with in the past who will mention something online and present themselves as a quote unquote expert. And I'm like, but you
Mm,
might not have worked on that. And again, there have been examples. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but there have been examples of people who I've worked with in the past who, basically take responsibility for something. Um,
mhm.
and I'm like, but you actually weren't part of that, or you didn't control that part of it. So you coming here and offering this advice, one, is not founded on experience, and two, might not even be good advice. But no
Yeah.
one knows. Like, and I'm not trying to start fights on social media with
Mhm.
random people or past
No energy.
coworkers.
No
It's
energy.
certainly not my place to do that, but I
Yeah.
do think that could lead and does lead to a lot of kind of like broken trust around people posting things online because people can just
Yeah.
say anything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much noise. I think there has been a shift, maybe also influenced by influencer culture, like always wanting to be a thought leader or someone who gives advice or someone that is an expert. Like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like in the past, at least like 5 years in the tech world, especially like on LinkedIn, maybe on X, like it really has felt like there's so many people trying to make these long threads, long posts, trying to give this advice. Yeah, I think it maybe dilutes it, but I don't know what the influence is. I wonder why people are trying so hardly to step into that role. Because I think what kind of we can agree on is that like if you're a lot of these people who are listening, new freelancers, agency owners, or maybe have been doing this for a few years, yeah, like maybe that isn't the route that you take when it comes to engaging on social media. Maybe it's not like putting every opinion that you have out there in this kind of black and white thought leadership way. Maybe it is more so sharing your work and kind of
Yeah.
hopping into conversations rather than trying to become this expert. I don't think that's a necessity.
Yeah. I think the intent matters a lot, right? Like, I realize it can sound ironic us recording a podcast, which falls under that category. Um,
Mhm.
but, it's like when you reached out to me, you were like, I think it would be helpful for people to hear your perspective.
Yeah.
And that's also what I'm trying to do here, right? And I think there are a lot of people who are sharing their thoughts and experiences online because they want to be helpful or because they think something they've done is helpful. And I think there's also a lot of people who share their thoughts online because they want to be heard, uh,
Mm,
or because they want, again, like attention or credit. And I do think that's where it more often happens, where like people take credit for other people's work, or they're offering advice that they may not believe themselves or may not have experience
mhm.
applying, is when people are just truly being like adding to the noise because they want to be heard
Yeah.
versus like thinking about like who is the audience and are they like am I sharing something because I'm excited about it and because I think other people might
Mhm.
find it helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm like, okay, if we all just post really authentically for ourselves and we live in this utopia, I wish. Yeah,
I mean, I want to shout out one of my former coworkers, Lexi Barnhorn, who now leads influencer and social at Notion, and one of her guiding principles is don't be fake. Um, and obviously, it's a reduction and a memification of this, but it's true. Like I think it applies a lot across all of these things we talked about. And then I think especially as a freelancer, in an ideal world, you don't have to worry about your reputation, but the word of mouth motion and like you doing good work with a team and them feeling that as well, it is important. Your reputation is important, and so it is true that you can't be fake. Um, Also, because like the world is not that big. All it takes is one reference call that you thought
Yep.
you put down a good person for, and then they didn't actually have a good experience.
Yep.
That's all it takes for you to
No,
not.
110%. It's a small world. I think reputation matters. And I think when you boil it down and you think about having a social presence and engaging on social online, you're doing it to share your work, to connect with other people, meet new people, hopefully build trust and credibility, and hopefully have inbound clients coming in. When you just reduce it down, it's really these simple things. And so I think just trying to, like trying to post just for the sake of posting and to kind of become this expert, a thought leader, it actually is not really doing yourself a service most of the time. And especially, when there's people who've worked with you in the past and they know that you haven't been really involved in these types of projects before, or maybe they are like, wait, why is she, or why are they like saying this? Like, where did that come from? Where was that experience at?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like make good things
Yeah.
with good people. But
Other people.
even if you stop there, again, it's like I said, you don't necessarily need to have a social media presence. If you make good things with good people, those people will tell other people, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, you don't have to share it to the world. It's just an amplifier, right? It's just
Yes.
another channel.
That's
But I,
what I
I certainly have a lot of friends who just like they're not active on social media. I think this is especially common for some of my like designer friends
mm,
who, they love their kind of like they love to make things. That's where like a lot of their joy comes from. They
mm,
don't need the external validation as much, or friends that are more on the like true artist side. And yeah, a lot of them I think have found great success just through like finding one good client who will then speak good of them, and then
mhm.
you go on there.
Word of mouth. Yeah. I guess what does that look like for you? Like referral work, maybe from past people that you worked with at Notion, or that is the majority of my inbound is just through other people who've known me, worked with me, maybe have seen me on social, but I don't actively post a lot of my work. Like I used to be on X, but now really if I post, it's just on LinkedIn here and there. So I guess for you, like what is maybe the word of mouth referral kind of experience been like, if any?
Yeah, I probably would say a good like half and half because I am pretty active on social media. I do get
Mhm.
a considerable amount of inbound from social channels, but in terms of quality, a lot of that is lower than like me getting a text from a friend that is like, hey, someone I know is looking for something. Just because you have a deeper connection, right? Not that you don't have strong connections over social media, but you probably have stronger connections in person with people that you've worked with for a while or through friends. Yeah, and I will say that a lot of times too, when I meet with a team or someone who's interested in me, I always kind of offer that two-way street where I'm like, hey, maybe this doesn't work for me, but there's a lot of people I know that I can refer to you, right? Like I think the whole referral thing, especially word of mouth, like it's very lift all boats. It's very like you give
Mhm.
credit where credit is due to people that you've worked with and they will return the favor. And like again,
Almost.
if we all did that, it would be great. Um, yeah, and
Utopia.
I even think this worked for me, at Notion. I was very, very careful, I think a lot of times about making sure that, if a launch happened and I shared the social media links in Slack, I would just do a last check and make sure that I was tagging everyone
Yeah.
involved. And
Yep.
like you said, a lot of times that's a lot of people. It goes all the way back to, biz ops and strategy as they plan the feature and then to product and
Mhm.
to design. And, inevitably you're going to miss someone's name, but like doing your best to give credit where credit is due, people remember that, I think. And then
Do.
so when it comes
They
time
really
for
do.
them to share the love, I do think people remember that.
Yeah, 100%. Even if you know you want to leave, it's like the way that you exit, it's also so important. The way that people
Totally.
remember you. Yeah, again, your reputation. You never know who is going to think about you when, a friend of a friend needs a website designer or a social media marketer. Your name may come up, and that could be based on literally just their experience and memory working with you years ago.
Right. There's no ROI measurable, right? But in your heart that it feels right, and when it does then yield rewards for you and for other people, it feels really good. And I do think it's one of those unspoken
This whole
understandings.
time we're like, don't be fake, be a good person. That's
I did
what we love
want
to do.
I did want to touch on one of the things you just mentioned, which is um like something that you just said about like knowing when to exit or like how you're leaving.
Yeah, and like how you leave, like the energy that you kind of
Yeah.
carry on your way
I think
out.
that inevitably as a freelancer, you're going to come across teams or projects that, you signed on to and maybe you can't deliver or it's not the right fit. And I certainly have had experiences like that, but I still think that it's important to like communicate that early and often. Um, and to make sure that you aren't leaving that role with resentment and that people that contracted you or that you were working with or for aren't, you haven't burned that bridge with them and they're
Yeah.
not going to like have a bad experience. Because I think it's inevitable. You're going to come across a time when the fit is not right. And I think it's important to consider like, well, how do I, at Notion, we used to say like, how do you write a good last chapter? Like, especially like we used to use it in the support sense, right? It's like if someone is having a really bad experience, but you're able to turn it around, all of that negative sentiment is redirected and becomes positive, and you can leave them with a good impression. So I think it's the same thing as like when you are considering leaving even your full-time job. That was something that I was thinking about when I was leaving Notion, was like, I want to make sure that I work just as hard as I used to, and that I'm leaving Notion on like a good note, and that I can look back on my time there and it's not like tainted by resentment because I wasn't enjoying it or XYZ. So I do think there's a lot of thought there too, in terms of, making sure you have a good reputation. And like, even if the project didn't work out for you, they might ask you to come back because, they might have another project that's a good fit, or they can refer you to their network that will have a project for you that does fit you. Because I do think a lot of it really comes down to fit. It's not like your skills or whatever that's the problem. So keeping that in mind, like knowing there's nothing wrong that you did, but being very aware of like when things aren't going correctly so that you can gracefully exit and make sure both sides of the relationship are satisfied.
Yeah. And like when we're thinking about like leaving a full-time role, like you also have to realize, okay, if you're leaving a full-time role, you're freelancing, you're going into the freelance world, your full-time employer could contract you. Like you could freelance for them. Maybe you don't want to, but like that's also an option. And then I think what you said about, if you're taking on a project that's a freelance project and contract and you're not a right fit, like either catching that and saying, okay, like maybe this isn't working out, but then saying, hey, I know this person that would be better for the job. That matters so much. Yeah, I think the art of the referral is just, again, being considerate of other people and how you leave situations, for sure.
Yeah. And of yourself, like be considerate about like what you want to do. Obviously there's a benefit in like trying something new and like seeing like, hey, I've never done this before. It might be difficult. Can I push through that? And will I come through on the other end? There's also times when you just have to be candid and considerate with yourself and be like, I'm forcing myself to do something that I'm not good at, or I don't like doing. And you might just have to accept that. And again, really step back, and it'll be better for you and your, client in the long term.
100%. Yeah. You're doing both parties a disservice, yourself and the client, to continue trying to work in a way that doesn't suit you, or that, maybe skills that you don't have.
Like, I will never, ever again, I don't know how to make TikToks go viral. I'm just going to put that on the record right here. Do not ask me to like help you with your viral TikToks. So I know that because I gave it a try and it was not. I think to what, my initial desire to go freelance, like I can say without a doubt, like, it's like I've learned so much, kind of bopping around from company to company and doing, all of these things. I'm just putting myself in so many more environments, I think, and that is causing me to learn quickly. I think a lot of my learnings were things that I had felt or I thought like I would like or not like or be good at or not be good at. So not all of it is like brand new, but now I have evidence and now I have validation. And so I think coming out of, a year of being a freelancer, I know much more about myself and like what I want to do and the places where I want to work. And that clarity, I think, is really nice. And I don't know how much longer I'll continue freelancing, but it's like I have a completely different like initial scope of like what I tell people I can do now, because I know some things that I offered to do, like I realized I cannot offer to run your social accounts if I'm not a full-time employee. If you're like you're a hyper growth startup, it just can't work. So I no longer put that on the table. Whereas like, that was like the thing I told people I could do, and I did. So
oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for learning and for experimenting. Yeah, I think it's hard. It's hard to transition. I mean, even if you're excited about it, sometimes there's just that natural resistance to things. And in the natural resistance, the stuff that you just don't know what's about to, what's coming, what's about to hit you. And the freelance world, when you've never done before, can feel like a lot. This was a really great convo. Actually, the last thing that you just said reminded me that our last podcast guest, Paula De Diego, she left a question. She didn't know who I was going to interview next. So she left a question for you to answer. And I want you to leave a question for the next guest to answer, and so on. Her question was, what was the one project that made you feel like, whoa, I really like this type of work. I really like this type of industry. Was it something that you kind of already knew about yourself, or was it a surprise? Was it a curveball?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I hope I have a good answer.
If there was one.
Yeah.
So maybe it's your favorite project you worked on.
This has been a very culturally relevant thing that happened last year, and it wasn't really my project, but I got to kind of side along, see it happen, and play my little part in it. But Partiful last year saw a viral invite that someone had put up on a flyer in New York City about a little Timothy Chalamet lookalike competition.
The answer.
And, that happened organically, but the moment the team saw it, they were like, "Oh, this could be something. Like this is interesting. It's already getting some traction online." And it turns out that we knew the person organizing it, Anthony Poe, who used to be a YouTuber. I think he's actually returned to YouTube recently, but he had done a couple of like small pop-up events in New York, pretty chaotic, along the same style. There was
Yeah.
one that was bigger, and after that, the team had been in contact with him. So we basically jumped on it. The community lead, Luis, and the creative lead, Val, and then one of the team's advisors, Ike, and myself, we were all kind of just like, let's just support this, right? Like, this is already happening. We didn't plan it, but we were like, we'll fund it. We will, help add some branding and pizzazz and some extra stakes to it. We'll see where it goes. And where did it go? Like, it really did numbers. This has been top of mind because the SNL like trailer just came out, and Timothy Chalamet is hosting, and he brought some of the contestants whom we all met like on to SNL, which is just wild. So I do think, in response to Paula's question, like, I always knew, like, I'm very online, but I'm also very in real life. And I've always wanted to work with Partiful because they are an online tech product that really is focused around getting you off your phone and
Yeah,
off
I love it.
in person.
Yeah.
And I love that because I was just like, look at what the magic of like both of those sides can make, right? Like, this wouldn't have been such a thing if it weren't for the internet and for social media, but it also happened in real life and has had a lot of real life relevance and cultural relevance. So that for me kind of really, really hammered in, like, I'm still ironing this out myself, but in terms of like, do I want to work in this industry? I'm not saying I want to go into consumer social, but like, I do want to work on something where real people are involved and it's impacting like their life, not just their like business or their company.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great answer. And I had a feeling that was going to be it because it really turned into like an entire internet trend, like
Yeah.
it's fascinating to be a part of something like that. So I love
Yeah.
Partyful. I love what you guys are doing and what the team's built. Okay, well, what question would you love to leave the next guest?
Oh, okay. I think this one will be good, but it's basically like, where do you find inspiration? And that can either be a more practical answer of like, what products do you use, or like, where physically do you seek inspiration from? Or it can be more philosophical, like, what inspires you? And this, I don't think, has to apply necessarily to work. I'd
Yeah.
rather it be more, if it's for someone creative, I'd hope it'd be like more philosophical.
Mhm.
Or just like, like, what motivates you?
Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh. I love getting these questions. Like I'm passing them to other people, but I'm also like answering them in my
I
personal time. Like this is really good for me.
this is the
Um,
work
well, thank you so much, Alex. This was really,
for it.
really great. I'm really happy that we could do this. And for everyone listening, we'll drop Alex's information where you can reach him in the descriptions below. And yeah, we're going to be working on just a little bit of, you know, a blog and a template for people to use through Brave University together. So that will be there. So we'll kind of condense a lot of these things that we've been talking about into actionable steps for people. I think that's the key is like we can listen to podcasts all day, but what are we going to do after we listen to them? Like, are we going to put it into practice? So hopefully all of that helps, everyone listening kind of to do that. So thanks so much again, Alex. This was really great.
Thank you. Like I said, be more than a consumer, or I guess I'm stealing that from an artist, but like they said, be more than a
Be
consumer.
more than a consumer.